and this is an awesome presentation and you're going to love it. A round of applause for Marcus Pearl.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, everybody. How are you? Good to hear the microphone's working. Can I get a raise of hands of those of you that love playing golf? Right? Those of you that hate playing golf. Okay, those of you that are confused with your relationship with golf. I think we've covered everybody. But one thing I think we can all agree on is that golf is the world's worst spectator sport. There's two reasons for that. The first reason is when somebody hits a cracking shot down the fairway, you can't see anything because you're stuck behind people wearing polo shirts, shorts, and boat shoes usually. Second reason is when they do hit a great shot, you have to clap like this. So I'm just wondering, can you all give us your best golf clap, please? Right, now double it. Double it again. Double it again. And one more time. Thank you very much. Ultimately, what you've just done there is what today is all about. It's about magnifying things, taking small ideas and magnifying them into much larger things that add value. That add value to you as an insurance professional, that add value to your employer and your businesses, and most importantly, that add value to your client relationships. My name is Marcus Pearl. I'm here to talk to you for 30 minutes today about agriculture and technology. I'll start off with a story of innovation to begin with, then go through what our customers and some of our best brokers have told us they think are the three biggest trends in agriculture that you can use to potentially go and talk to your customers, be they primary producers or in food processing or even food consumption. After that, we'll talk about what's in this for you. And then if you've got any questions at any point in time, just feel free to put your hands up. I'm happy to talk to anybody at any time as we go along. When people ask who is Primacy and what it is we do, I show them this slide because ultimately we are only as good as the people that you see on this slide. We're a company that employs some terrific people that love your businesses and love your customers as much as you do, and we have a passion for agriculture. We also happen to be Australia and New Zealand's dominant provider of agricultural crop and forestry insurance, and it's something we're very, very proud of. We turn 25 years next year, and without these people and without you and your wonderful customers, we would be nothing, and that's not something we ever take for granted. I asked those group of terrific people to tell me about you, the people sitting in front of me here today. What are the things you love? What are the things you hate? What are some of the things that annoy you, like our friend the cat here? This is what they told me. I'd be interested to hear how they did in terms of how you think they went. First thing is they said that brokers in Australia at the moment seem to be very concerned about competition. They feel like competition is intensifying amongst brokers and direct insurers, but some days of the week, you're not even sure who the hell you're actually competing against anymore. The next thing they told me was regulation is causing you to question in some cases how you operate with your customers and how you operate your business. In some cases that's a great thing, but it's another thing that you have to take care of in your business that wasn't there 5 or 10 years ago. You're also concerned about what the effect that increased regulation will have on your perception of the industry and your reputation in the industry, the integrity that you all hold very dear. That's why you work in insurance and why your customers trust them with their assets and in some cases their livelihoods. They also told me about this concept of doing more, particularly if you that work in large broking houses. Demands to go out and get more market share, demands to go out and get more revenue. But there's also the things you're wonderfully excited about, and I'm super excited about Taylor Swift's new album, by the way, but we'll talk about that later on. They said they told me that you love bringing yourself to work and not having to conform necessarily with the mantra of other industries. You can bring yourself to work, bring that to your relationships with your customers and add value. You love spending time with your customers, as we here at Primacy do also. But you're also concerned that those relationships are becoming filtered and distracted with technology necessarily, as opposed to just sitting down and having good quality conversations with your customers. They also told me that you're excited about innovation, but in some cases, innovation also looks more like this in some of your offices than boundless opportunity, blue sky type thinking. So what I thought I'd do is drill down on this last one. How did they do, by the way? Did they miss any? No? You also love great Christmas parties? I'll put that there next time. So let's drill down on innovation for one thing. And I thought, instead of just going straight into ag tech, let's talk about innovation because they go hand in hand with each other. So let's take a massive step back and have a look at our solar system. We're the third planet from the right. 7 billion people live on that little dot there. I don't know why we actually called it Earth, because only 71% of our planet is actually covered by water. I guess we can change that some other time. 40% of the 7 billion people that live on that planet work in agriculture. It's a huge part of the global economy, and 40% roughly of the food you eat is based around commodities that we particularly trade in, which are the grain commodities. 25% of the world's plastic is consumed, is used in food production or primary production. So it's part of every single value chain you talk about, and it's part of your daily life, albeit you may not necessarily know it. The world's a very precious place. We know that 37% of the world, of the earth, in terms of the dirt that sits on it, is used for agriculture, so a huge percentage of their overall land mass. Most North Americans view the world like this. They live at the top, some other people live down the bottom and they're not sure what's on the other side. Australia looks at the world like this, and as a proud Australian, geez, we were lucky when God was giving out continents, weren't we? Where's the Tasmanians in the room? I know, come on. There's a support group, you can admit it. No one here was born in Tasmania. Are you serious? God. Okay, just me, that's awkward. Well, if you're Tasmanian, the world looks like this. And it's quite an accurate description because Tassie left off the map, we're in the dark, but we know we're on top of the world. So, if we had to think about the world and nominate a capital city for our wonderful planet, all of you in this room would probably nominate this city. I would nominate this city, which is Hobart. Most of you, by the looks of it, have never been there. You should get down there. Growing economy, lowest unemployment, we won't go there. But I think if you had an objective stance, this city would probably be the one that you would pick. It's the city of New York. Most of the world's capital sits here. Most of the world's political influence sits here, particularly if you're a Democrat. This is where all the money comes from to fund all those wonderful Democrats that sit in Washington. 3 or 5 years from now, we might be talking about this city as the global capital, which is the city of Shanghai. But for the moment, let's just concentrate on New York and tell a small story about this city over time in the context of innovation. This is a picture of New York in 1880, a very different city to the city that you all visit now. The tallest building on New York at this time was a church spire in Midtown. The population was about 1.2 million people. Of those 1.2 million people, most of them were living in squalor. The apartments you see here don't have running water. They don't have any type of sanitation. There's no toilets in there, etc. The dominant mode of transport is by horse. Life is pretty tough in this city if you're in the bottom 80% of the people that live here. If we grabbed one of these people and looked at their daily life, he may live on this street here. That's not snow or dirt, that's horse manure, because the Clean Street Patrol hasn't been invented yet. It's not uncommon to walk through the streets of New York in 1880 and see dead animals or dead horses lying around, and this is the horse manure that they solved that problem in a few years down the track, but not quite yet. But if we grabbed one of those guys or one of those ladies from the street in 1880, put them in our little time machine and bolted them forward a mere 50 years, this is the city they would be living in. A completely different place. The population is increased by almost 6 million people. It's just under 8 million people living in this town. The tallest building in the world sits in front of you there, which for most of this century has still been the world's tallest building. People are living in apartments. All of those apartments would have running water by now. There's no issues with life expectancy, which has increased by almost 25 years. You're getting the picture. There's electricity sitting here. People are running around this city in public transport, underground, even going underwater. 50 years earlier, that would have been fantasy. People flying around in metal objects in the sky called aeroplanes. Now, let's grab that same guy and take him forward a few more years and see what New York looks like now. 1970 comes along. Ultimately, this is a city that looks pretty similar to what it saw only a few decades earlier. And the point I'm making, which is worth noting here, is things have always changed over time. And we know that, but they change at different rates over time. And there's a lot of you that have told me in client meetings, and my staff have told me when I asked them to tell me about you, that you're concerned that the rate of innovation that the world is going through at the moment is leaving some of you behind, and it's difficult to keep up with. My argument would be there's certain times and places and industries that get affected by innovation differently, and there's been times in history where innovation's moved at a much faster rate. The rate of change going forward for technology in other industries, I'm being simplistic about this, it will move at a fast rate, but this is a good example to show, let's take a step back and actually look at the world and see what is actually happening as opposed to what the news media tell us is happening. A good example, where's the millennials in the room? Right, not as rare as Tasmanians, but good to see you. Good to be here. When your parents, you guys are out on Saturdays eating avocado toast, when your parents were your age, they were out buying avocado kitchens. And this is a kitchen in 1970. The only difference between this kitchen that your parents were buying and the kitchen that you probably have now is it looks a lot more stylish because that's the way you guys fly. But the only invention that's sitting in that kitchen versus your parents' kitchen is the invention of the microwave oven. Again, things are changing, that's true, and I'm oversimplifying it, but let's also keep some things in perspective about what's not changing, and particularly the face-to-face relationship and the trust that you have in your clients is getting higher in terms of demand, but the same old true practices that worked 20 years ago are probably true also today. So what the hell does all this have to do with agriculture? Let's talk about, in simple terms, what's happened with agriculture over the past 50 years in particular, because agriculture's gone through one of those 1880 to 1930 moments, particularly in the last 50 years. This is probably the longest graph that you'll see for some time. It goes back 150 years. This is corn and grain yield, so the amount that's produced per hectare or per acre in this case. So per bit of land, how much crop do we get out of that? As you can see, it remained fairly flat from about the mid-1800s to about World War II, and it's increased 700%. So the same amount of dirt that was there 150 years ago is now producing 700 times the amount of grain and corn that it produced back then. This is modern day miracle stuff, and ultimately this is what has fed the increased population to what the 7 billion people we now have on Earth. This is interesting to note also. This is the same period of time up to 2006. This is the price of that commodity. Now, as you can, it's normalised for inflation with the midpoint sitting at about 1940. If you want the statistics of this, I'm happy to give them to you afterwards. But ultimately, you can see that the price trend has been lower. So as those yields have increased, particularly from 1940, the second half of this graph, you'll see that price has come down. So the more innovation you bring into a market, the more you can produce, the cheaper you can produce it for, will mean that prices over time will come down. Now, in commodity markets, there's some exceptions to this. The first exception is the breakout of World War I, which is the massive increase. The second increase is the breakout of World War II. And the third increase in the 1970s, for those of you that were living in those avocado kitchens at the time, might remember the oil shocks, the US, Middle Eastern oil shocks that sent global commodity prices higher. Now, it's important to note what happened after 2006. And this was a huge beneficiary for this wonderful country that we live in, and that was the rise of China. Now, China went from being a net exporter of a number of commodities to a net importer of pretty much every commodity in the world other than oil. And this had a huge effect on the global economy and trade markets. We all kind of knew this was going to happen, but we didn't understand the extent it would have. So we had a massive run up in prices up to the global financial crisis. And then when the US debt bomb exploded and the world growth contracted, commodity prices went back to normal and those yields continue to increase. Effectively what happened in China at the time was its workers went from building all those fridges going into our kitchens and being sold to middle-class families in Australia, Europe and the US. Their workers shifted from a rice diet, which they're self-sufficient in, to a wheat-based diet, which they have to import. And effectively that is now switched back, or it switched back for a few years whilst the market adjusted. So let's talk about some of the three of the largest ag trends that you might be able to take back and use in conversations with your customers. And this all weaves together nicely here. The first biggest trend that we've seen is camera imagery. Now, this comes in two main forms, and all of you will be very aware with the first one being in insurance. The first one comes from drone technology. Now, this has been kind of overdone in some respects over the past decade. About most people now are fully aware of what happens with drones and what the use of that technology is. The second part of imagery in agriculture really comes from these things, which are satellites. Now, we all use Google Maps. Well, I assume we all use Google Maps or some form of mapping software. When those images were loaded from satellites 10 years ago, those satellites were about the size of 1 or 2 refrigerators bolted together and cost tens and tens of millions of dollars each, hundreds of millions of dollars for the program. The satellite that you see in front of you here costs about $1.2 million and almost does as good a job as one of those satellites from 10 years ago. What this has meant is there's been a huge decrease in the price and ability for people in the insurance industry or the farming industry to use satellite imagery on their farms. A good example of how this has changed in a short period of time is that horrible event, the New South Wales bushfires. Who of those who remember those in 2013? 500 houses lost, 2 people died, 180,000 hectares. Did anyone have a customer affected by that? Nobody? 2? Yep. So it's a very serious event. If we had this technology back then, we've all seen these type of images, but we're now using live satellite information almost, or slightly delayed, to help fire crews get to certain areas and to help rescue of individual people. In the insurance world, we're down the pecking order in terms of access to these areas after the events, and particularly with crop insurance products such as Broadacre, etc. And we've seen this in places like South Australia and Western Australia, where we have fire events. Our assessors can't get access to those areas for 4, 5, 6 weeks after the event, and nor should we. Emergency crews should have precedence over that. What this technology allows us to do is to pinpoint areas of claims, come up with provisional claim amounts, which our loss adjusters help us do, and then get those funds to your customers as soon as they possibly can, at a time that they probably also desperately need it. We've experimented with this with Broadacre. This is a forestry example. This is a hail loss in New South Wales. If this loss had occurred 10 or 15 years ago, we would have to get our gumboots on, get into that forest and work out which parts of that forest were most damaged. That would take several days. The image on the left now allows us to do that in a matter of moments using satellite imagery or a drone. Our farmers and your farmers, in terms of if you've got any of the customers, will be using this technology already, generally speaking. They may not be using it themselves, but their contractors definitely will be. So they're agronomists or their seed providers or somebody else helping them on the farm. This is a system called GeoSys. It's terrific for mapping farm boundaries, etc. But its real power comes when we use the satellite imagery to work out soil types and moisture types in paddocks that farmers can then use to adjust the way that they farm that land. When Europeans arrived in our wonderful country, they came with pencils and they came with rulers. And they divided the land up according to their own rules, not necessarily soil types, river valleys or riverbeds. So this information now allows your customers to tailor exactly how they farm the land and get much more productive yield. To end this, what this means is there's a huge amount of data in the world which is flowing into the cloud. And we all know that. We all produce huge amounts of it on our own social media and in our own businesses. This data is being pumped up into the massive amounts of the cloud, and it's very, very useful to look at and interesting. But the next phase of growth in agriculture, I think, comes from that data being used by a computer that has the ability to interpolate it and turn it into an action that a farmer can actually use to increase productivity. And that then rolls into the second big trend in ag tech, which really is a thing called precision agriculture. Now, this comes in a number of forms, but ultimately this data is being used to map genomes of plant biodiversity and also work out better ways of farming. This is a glass house in New South Wales, and a lot of you that have seen this, the tomatoes that you now buy at the supermarket 20 years ago, 10 years ago, they were probably ground grown. Now they're grown in highly industrialised, controlled environments which use data to ensure that you're getting a perfect bunch of tomatoes at Coles. In fact, this is where Coles tomatoes and capsicums come from. The second part of it is farmers now have at their fingertips a huge amount of data that allows them to farm better. So instead of a traditional tractor perhaps looking like this, albeit this one has a computer in it, this is not a driverless tractor, by the way. There's a driver that needs to control this one. But instead of the field looking like that, it's starting to look a whole lot more like this. And your customers, this is a great opportunity for you because it means their yields are increasing, the dollar they're spending on equipment are increasing, and they need great advice in terms of risk management strategies to help them with that. The third big trend in ag tech, as we see it and our customers have told us, is the way we modified foods through seed production, and also the way we actually farm, the way we actually crop. And these two things have caused the biggest increase in that graph I showed you before in terms of yield. Let's go back to 1982. I was just born at the time. Everyone know who this guy is? We're in New South Wales. So he was not a liked figure in New South Wales in 1982 because Queensland had won the state of origin. Hand up if you're a rugby person. Right, AFL. Right, wow, that's minority. No one cares, but Carlton won the premiership and Parramatta won the NRL that year. The big thing everybody was doing that year was watching this wonderful person on television with an iconic song. But for those that weren't watching MTV at the time or watching the Parramatta Eels win the premiership, our farmers were looking at this picture out their backyard. It was a very, very, very bad drought that year. The seasonal rainfall in areas south of here was a roughly 25% of what a farmer would annually get. Interestingly, in 2017, the season was almost exactly the same, almost to the millimetre, where the season conditions were very, very similar, where growers had about 25% of their annual rainfall during the season and also pretty much exactly the same amount before their season. Interesting to note, in 1982, when a farmer got their header out, or they wouldn't have even bothered, because there was nothing to harvest that year. In areas south of here, for wheat crops, for example, in 2017, 18 and 19, they were yielding averages of about 1.3, 1.5 tonnes per hectare, which is amazing. Let me give you some visual representation of this. This is a field in the Mallee district in 1983. You can see it, there's a whole heap of topsoil that's gone up against that fence, and ultimately millions, tens of millions of dollars of productive topsoil blew into the Pacific Ocean that year because farmers were tilling the soil, there was no crop in there to hold that soil together, and there was no rain to hold it together. So ultimately, decades worth of fertiliser and investment in Australia's topsoil blew into the Pacific Ocean that year. Here's the exact same photo of that exact same paddock decades later with different crop practices and different seed technology. It's harvested a crop, albeit it's well below average, but the farmer is getting income. You as insurance brokers are insuring that crop. The soil is ready for another season, as you can see, and that grower actually has income. No difference in the climatic conditions, only two things. The type of seed that they're planting in the ground and the way it's been genetically modified, and the farming practice they use to manage their soil has improved drastically, and that's improved yield. So what does this mean for you? What does all this mean for you? We asked some of our customers this in terms of how do we stitch this together in terms of how can you as insurance brokers keep up with innovation and keep up with ag tech in your own businesses and stay relevant with your clients. The first piece of advice some of our brokers gave us was this: spend as much time as you humanly possibly can. Most of the people in this photograph are actually in this room. So Sook's here, Tan's just to the right there, so and Carpenter was here also. This is, well, it's not actually one of our customers. We took all our staff out this year. We're in a cotton field in the Riverina area. These are our IT guys. That's a graduate, that's our operations manager on the right there, and that is not our customer. He actually insures with one of our competitors. The best thing to do in these environments is to go out and talk to customers. We love talking to our customers, but we also want to go out and talk to the people that don't use our products and understand why. The more time you spend with your customers, the more innovation you'll be able to give to them and to give to us, so we can help you grow your business and help them protect their farming operations. The second big piece of advice that farmer there gave me in that paddock on that day was to read as widely as you possibly can. Innovation and improved business processes don't come from a God-given right or a bolt of lightning that hits you. It comes through immersing yourselves in things that aren't necessarily exactly relevant to what you're doing today in your industry. This farmer taught me a huge amount about that and showed me his book list that he was running through at the time, and most of them had nothing to do at all with farming. The third thing is in our industry in particular, we need more leaders, and Australia is amazing at producing managers. Now, generally speaking, managers demand authority. A manager's job is to look at what somebody is doing today and yesterday and gently improve it over time. Now, we need that, and our country's benefited greatly from it in terms of farming and also natural resources. But a leader takes a step back, understands what's going on, understands where they want to go, builds a tribe of people around them, and ultimately a leader takes responsibility for the actions of that tribe and gives them the tools to move forward. If you want to work in an innovative industry, if you want to work in an innovative company, and you want to have an innovative family, ultimately that's what we need to build. At Primacy, our job is to build the tools that you require so you can give the best possible tools of the trade to your tribe and your company and your customers to help them grow their business and manage their business. We'll be doing this particularly a lot in the next 12 to 18 months, but here's some of our existing tools that we already have in place that we give to our customers. There's a live status updates for our claim system, which is particularly useful for farmers to understand what's going on. And we also provide a number of online resources so your customers can fully understand how their products work, help you understand how their products work, and what to do when it matters most. Our job is to provide you with the tools to better any direct provider, be it Amazon or anybody else out there that's trying to attack your business, to ensure that you have the best tools out there so you can go out and serve your customers properly. I'll end with this video, and ultimately it brings this all together and shows you that as we innovate and we do things differently, here's an Italian bike rider that's running last in the race. We have to do things differently. When we do things differently, we gain reward. So he's gone from fifth to fourth to third to second, overtakes first, and he's now in the front because he's doing something differently. But you've got to keep in mind, once you're out in front and you're doing things differently, and there's some wonderful people in our industry that have always been out in front, people like John Vanderveck, people like Deirdre McCallum, people like Greg Conley, who lead our industry and push the limits. But ultimately, you need to keep on doing it, otherwise this happens. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Marcus Pearl, and it's been a great pleasure to be with you today. Thank you very much.
Yeah.